Welcome to Lies of the Orange Era. So, guess what just happened? The Supreme Court just greenlit mass deportations for 350,000 Venezuelans, most of whom have jobs, kids, homes, and lives here. And that was just the opening act, because Donald Trump, he's not stopping at a few 100,000. He wants to deport 1 million people this year. 1 million in a single year. Like he's loading the country into an Uber and tapping "Get out." And if you're thinking that sounds logistically impossible and morally deranged, congratulations, you're correct. But guess what? It's already started. Trump isn't just dreaming up on Truth Social while rage-scrolling memes. He's backed by a Supreme Court that just rubber-stamped the revocation of temporary protected status, and a judge in Pennsylvania who literally used an 18th century wartime law to fast-track deportations. Yes, the Alien Enemies Act, a law written in 1798 to deal with actual wartime threats, not Uber drivers and factory workers. We're not deporting families under legislation written with a quill pen, are we? This is the country now where 350,000 people just got told, thanks for working, thanks for paying your taxes, now get the fuck out of here. Where Project Homecoming offers you $1,000 travel voucher and a free app download if you self-deport like it's spring break on giveaway. Coming up, we're going to ask, is this even remotely feasible? What's it going to cost us? And why is Trump supposedly so interested in reinventing ICE? Spoiler, it involves a big, stupid law, a $69 billion budget grab, and a voluntary deportation program with about as much legal foundation as a wish on a monkey's paw. All right, first off, let's talk logistics, because Trump says he's going to deport 1 million people in a year. That's about 2,740 people a day, or about 7 full 747s every single day, assuming ICE is now running Spirit Airlines, Deportation Edition. I wonder if they'll let him borrow that plane that he just got gifted. And sure, the administration says it's ambitious, which is like saying the apprentice could solve immigration if the prize was deportation and everyone lost. But, let's, for the sake of argument, let's do the math. Deporting one person cost about $10,000. So multiply that by 1 million, we got 10 billion. And that's just transportation, detention, and court proceedings. Now add the one big beautiful bill. Yes, that's the real name, which includes $69 billion in new immigration spending. We're talking massive ICE and CBP hiring, expanded detention centers, overtime pay, surveillance tech, legal infrastructure, and of course, don't forget the $1,000 bribes to get people to leave voluntarily. That's Project Homecoming. You log in, you click self-deport, and you get your thank you for playing cash prize. Except, there's no congressional law backing it. No guarantee the money even exists. And no explanation of where they're pulling that $1 billion budget from. Unless the strategy is just like selling NFTs of Trump's mugshot. Okay, so let's talk about Project Homecoming, which sounds like a Netflix rom-com starring a high school quarterback and an ICE agent. But no, it's Trump's voluntary deportation plan. The pitch, you ask? You leave the country on your own, and the government gives you $1,000 and a free flight. Sounds generous, until you realize many of these people have lived and worked here for years, paid taxes, started families. So you're offering them a $1,000 check to people who have already spent years building lives, as if that's supposed to make them leap onto the plane with a smile? You think someone's going to walk away from a life they've spent a decade building for a one-time payment that barely covers a month of rent in Ohio? It's insulting. And it's not even backed by law, just a website. a digital self-deportation portal where you type in your info, request a one-way ticket, and you hope someone at DHS Venmos you $1,000. This isn't immigration policy. It's the digital equivalent of getting dumped via email. No oversight, no guarantee, no confirmation your plane lands somewhere that you actually live or that won't imprison you. Just thanks for playing. Please exit through gate 404, country not found. Now, let's talk about how this is even happening, because Trump's not just pushing policies, he's pulling legal justifications from deep in the historical basement. So let's start with this gem, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Originally passed during fears of French spies under President John Adams, our second president, it gave the president power to detain or deport nationals from countries the U.S. was actually involved in a war with. Not people overstaying visas. Not people with families here. Enemies in wartime. We're now using it to deport Venezuelan immigrants. And just to be clear, in case nobody's paying attention, we're not at war with Venezuela, unless Trump considers CNN coverage an act of aggression. This law was used in real wartime. British nationals during the War of 1812, Germans and Austro-Hungarians in World War I, Japanese and Italian nationals in World War II. We now see much of that history as a cautionary tale. It wasn't written for immigration policy. It was written for war, not racism. Not to sweep up undocumented laborers or send families to prisons abroad because someone in MAGA hat thinks Venezuela sounds scary. But this ancient law was revived by a federal judge in Pennsylvania and upheld until the Supreme Court stepped in and said, actually, due process still matters. Kind of. It's being tested right now, again, in 2025. And if it spreads, anyone from a country Trump vaguely dislikes should be declared a threat and fast-tracked out of here. All right, let's talk about what this is really funding. Because Trump's one big beautiful bill isn't just a name that sounds like he dictated it mid-golf swing. It's a legislative package stuffed with $69 billion for immigration enforcement. And that money isn't just going to ICE agents and deportation flights. It's going to expanded detention facilities, coming soon to a town near you, military-style surveillance tools, private contractors running deportation logistics, and entire new task forces inside local police departments to help execute federal immigration raids. Local cops now deputized as ICE assistants because nothing says respecting states' rights like building your city council on a border patrol light. You know who's loving this? Defense contractors, the same companies that used to make drones and riot gear for Afghanistan, now making thermal body scanners for El Paso and GPS cuffs for toddlers in detention. And here's the dark little cherry on top. This same bill proposes cuts to Medicaid and other safety nets to help pay for it. So if you're keeping track, we can't afford insulin, but we've got room in the budget for jet fuel, ankle monitors, and a data center in the desert tracking who bought tortillas at 7-Eleven. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. What happens to the people doing the deporting? The ICE agents. The police department's now running immigration task forces. The bureaucrats hitting approve on mass removal orders from behind a desk. Most of these people didn't join the job planning to separate families or lock people in detention centers. But humans, we're adaptable. That's the good news and the horrifying part. Because history shows us over and over, if you're told you're just following orders and everyone around you is doing it, you'll start to believe that it's normal, even necessary, even good. Not because you're evil, because your brain wants to protect you from guilt, because it feels better to believe you're defending the country than to admit you're hauling a dad into a van at 4 a.m. And when the boss says you're making America safer, you don't even ask how. You just clock in and follow the spreadsheet. So let's recap. Trump wants to deport 1 million people in a year, a goal that's logistically absurd, financially obscene, and morally bankrupt. He's doing it using a 226-year-old maritime law never meant for immigration. He's launched a digital self-deportation platform with no legal backing and a $1,000 bait and switch. He's got a Supreme Court willing to rubber stamp massive removals, even if it uproots families who've lived here for decades. He's asking for $69 billion to fund private contractors, militarized surveillance, and a growing army of deputized local cops. And he's feeding a system that numbs the people enforcing it until the cruelty stops feeling like cruelty at all. This isn't border policy. It's a psychological operation disguised as governance. It's not about security. It's about control. Control over who gets to belong. Control over what dissent looks like. Control over what cruelty looks like when it's printed on official letterhead and backed by budget appropriations. Because if Trump and his allies can make mass deportation look normal, what else becomes just another line item? America doesn't need another deportation app. It needs fewer fascist fantasy bills and more functioning moral compasses. Subscribe if you agree or don't, but then you'll miss the good jokes.